Yes, before we return to a JRPG series with Kingdom Hearts 358 Days Over 2, we're going to be taking a look at another JRPG. A very different one, sure, but a JRPG nonetheless. Now, like a lot of people, Persona 5 is the very first game that I've played in the series' 20-year career, and that's mostly because, believe it or not, this is the first game to come out on console since the PS2 days.
For those unaware, the Persona games started as spin-offs for the Shin Megami Tensei series, both created by Atlus, but Persona became so popular that it removed the Shin Megami Tensei name and formed its own franchise. But despite that claim, I never knew anybody who played Persona. I think it was more of a series that had a small but purely dedicated fan base. That was until the 5th main entry came out in 2017, where the series' popularity completely skyrocketed. Probably similar to what Final Fantasy VII did for that series. This isn't my first rodeo with Atlus though. Early last year I took a look at their cult classic Catherine, hint hint, and gave a pretty positive review for its solid puzzle gameplay and well-written story. By the way, I'm really looking forward to the remastered version coming out titled Full Body, which will also contain more content. I'll definitely be doing a looking back at video for that. As for Persona, I was willing to try out the newest game since the graphics and the focus on story looks remarkably similar to Catherine, but I held off on it because I was worried there'd be a massive information overload like in some other RPGs, and for the fact that even to this day it's still quite expensive. In fact, I only managed to get my copy as a Christmas gift from my parents. I knew absolutely nothing about the Persona games until this latest one, but from what I understand, they're half turn-based RPG action battling against demons and monsters, while the other half is a Japanese high school life simulator where you need to socialize with your friends to gain new abilities for combat. All of that sounds pretty cliche on paper, at least that's what I thought at first, but Persona 5 convinced me that there's much more to it than that. And I'll say now that Persona 5 is a fantastic starting point for anybody new to the series such as myself. It's got its own story and an entirely different cast of characters, so researching beforehand won't be required. There are plenty of simple, albeit rather plentiful tutorials spread throughout the first few hours of the game to get you into the swing of things, and you slowly take in what's going on in the story so that your brain's not totally overloaded. This would be the point where I'd give a full plot summary of the game, but in this case, I really don't want to because Persona 5's story is that good. It's exactly the same as how I felt when talking about Catherine, and Atlus seemed to be really good at it. I'll try and not give away too much, but I'd like to give you a general idea of what the ultimate goal is. We start off in a large casino and see our main protagonist committing what looks like to be a robbery, but after escaping, he gets caught in an ambush by the police and they proceed to capture and question him. It's here we can name the protagonist whatever you want, but according to the anime and Dancing Star Night, Persona 5's upcoming rhythm tie-in game, this guy's canonical name is Ren Amamiya. The prosecutor, called Sae Nijima, comes into the interrogation room to find out why and how Ren is doing what he is, and a large portion of the game at this point is told via flashback. We see that Ren defended a young woman from being potentially abused by a severely drunken man, but he instead ends up being falsely accused of assaulting and injuring the man. So now he's under a year-long probation and gets expelled from his school, meaning he'll have to move to a new town and a new school under the shelter of a cafe owner. Obviously, being a high school, word spreads around very quickly about Ren's supposed crime and make it extremely difficult for him to fit in. But that's just the beginning of his bad first day, as Ren and his new buddy Ryuji also notice that the school has kinda turned into a giant castle, and yeah, something ain't right about that. After getting thrown into the castle's dungeon, they find out that the ruler is their gym teacher named Kamoshida. At near death, Ren sporadically awakens to the spirit that helps remove the guards holding him and Ryuji hostage, allowing them to escape, and to also change into cooler clothing because I guess he hates school uniforms. On their way out though, they meet with this talking cat named Morgana. Because if Japanese media has taught me anything, there always has to be a talking cat. But after freeing Morgana, he proceeds to tell Ren and Ryuji what exactly is going on here. Kamoshida's castle is what he calls a palace, where the distorted desires of any human beings take shape in the world known as the metaverse. The metaverse is accessed by using a mobile app and saying the right keywords, and the palace's rulers are merely shadows and not the real thing. In the case for Kamoshida, he views the high school as his castle and him as the king, while the students of the school are mindless slaves that he continuously tortures. And he even forces one of the students named An into a sexual relationship with him. This becomes even more apparent when some of the kids in the real world are covered in bruises and bandages and keep getting called into Kamoshida's office, so it's no secret at this point that the bastard's up to no good. To make him pay for his crimes, Ren, Ryuji, Morgana, and the newly recruited An need to locate and steal Kamoshida's so-called treasure within his palace. Once it's taken to the real world, then supposedly Kamoshida will have a change of heart and confess everything he's done, branding our new group of heroes as the Phantom Thieves of Hearts. All of this happens within the first few hours of the game. It may seem like I'm spoiling a lot, but trust me, this is only a small sample of what's to come. Kamoshida is not the only crooked adult out there, and the story can get pretty dark sometimes. There's attempted suicide, denial, blackmail, slavery. This is a messed up world these people live in, and many of the rotten adults committing these crimes appear to have palaces of their own. The palaces have a big theme on the 7 deadly sins. There are 7 main ones you go through in the game, each representing a different sin, like lust, greed, or pride, and all of them are very conveniently found in one single area in the whole of Tokyo. But the Phantom Thieves aren't going to let any of it carry on, and along the way you gain more members for your team, each with their own personal motives for taking down a particular criminal, and make it their mission to cause a change of heart to all warped minds. They're like the superheroes that Japan desperately needs, but not everyone's in agreement with that. There aren't only those out there who think that the Phantom Thieves shouldn't force people to change the way they are, but we've also got the police trying to catch them because they're considered dangerous. The story unravels all sorts of plot twists and new details as it goes, and first-timers will take 80 to 90 hours to finish it, a little over 70 if you know what you're doing. But because of how engrossing it is both in gameplay and story, it never felt as long as it actually was. It's very easy to lose track of time in Persona 5. There's no such thing as playing for a short while. Your ass is practically glued to your seat almost the entire time, and man, I got lost in this game's world so often, I'm always shocked to see how much I'd really been playing. And I'll tell you why this game is such a blast. Let's cover the combat first, since that's one of the more, I guess, traditional aspects of Persona 5. It's all turn-based, which isn't unusual for a JRPG, but it does put a bit of a new spin on it. All of the battles take place inside of a person's palace and basically act as the game's dungeons, but after clearing the first palace, you also have access to mementos, which is basically the distorted views of the general public, though not nearly as drastic as some of the palaces. Mementos contains randomly generated maze rooms that you drive Morgana around because they wanted to reference My Neighbor Totoro.
No, really, that's the reason he turns into a car.
The only justification to access mementos at all is to fill in requests for the Phantom Thieves completely unrelated to the story. They're pretty much this game's side quests and a good way to get a fair bit of experience points earlier than intended, and it's also the only way to improve your friendship with this kid named Mishima so that you can increase the amount of experience points everyone earns, including backup members. Speaking of battling, you have standard melee attacks that do an okay amount of damage, but to get the best results, you'll need to take advantage of your party's different personas. Remember the spirit that Ren awakened to earlier? That was his first persona, named Arsene. Personas are essentially physical representations of your true nature, but during battles, they let the party cast all sorts of elemental and hard-hitting melee attacks. Each character's persona is specialized in one particular element, so for example with An, her magic is fire-based, and with Haru, she concentrates on psychokinetic abilities. But Ren, on the other hand, who I'll just call Joker from now on since that's his Phantom Thieves codename, is the only one able to wield multiple personas with many different attacks. Once per turn, Joker can switch and use another persona in case the one you've got currently selected isn't ideal for that particular fight. And not only that, Joker's able to obtain more personas if the party downs all the enemies by exploiting their weaknesses or dealing critical hits. Afterwards, you can talk to a certain enemy and try to convince them to aid you. Alternatively, you can choose to bribe enemies for money and items in exchange for their retreat, or you can be a total savage and use the spectacularly flashy all-out attacks, which provide an incredible amount of damage to all of the enemies and 9 times out of 10 will instantly kill them. Guns are also available for each character, but they're not nearly as useful since ammo is extremely limited and don't hurt enough to be worth it. The only time you'll really need to use them are for enemies weak to guns. You are able to buy stronger ones in town and even customize them if your bond with the shopkeepers high enough, but I think melee weapons should take higher priority over the guns. They're a lot more reliable and don't cost anything to use. But the weapons in general should mainly be used if you can get away with it, otherwise you're way better off just summoning your personas. Saying that though, you really don't want to run out of SP, or skill points for short, which is what's needed for your personas to cast magic in the first place. Without any SP to spare, the game suddenly gets much harder. There's only so much melee attacks can do, especially against those assholes that repel them. Now some personas do carry heavy physical and gun attacks which cost a bit of health instead of SP, but most party members only have the rare few to earn as they level up, with the exception of Ryuji and Yusuke, who are sort of half and half on physical and magical attacks. Personas will also eventually be able to cast buffs on party members, which will most likely be needed during boss fights, so the lesson here is use your personas but not too much. You still need them to help, but you also want to save them. Abuse them to hell and back, but also use them sparingly. Yeah, I think that's it. The only way you can restore SP is by using consumable items in the palaces, or by leaving the palace entirely and coming back to it another day. And you are going to need to do that occasionally because palaces are pretty huge and almost impossible to finish on one journey. But thankfully, they're all very interesting and unique in design, and none of them feel alike to one another. Not all of them are fun to travel through. I personally didn't like the space station, and the giant bank could get pretty annoying sometimes. But the palaces that are interesting outshine the bad ones. And of course, being the Phantom Thieves, you also need to be sneaky, because if you get caught, spot, then this percentage meter gradually fills up. If it reaches the top, then you're forced to leave the palace and try again next time. Don't worry though, stealth isn't as complicated as something like Metal Gear. Enemies will only spot you if you're directly in front of them, and if they happen to be in your way, you can just hide in a corner somewhere and ambush them there and then. Ambushing enemies is incredibly easy to do, and not once have I ever had to leave the palace because I got caught too many times. Going back to the battles, you'll sort of go through a repeated process. You try everything you've got to search for the enemy's weakness, you find the weakness and down the enemy while also being given a 1 more, which lets you attack again after pinning a foe. When all the enemies are down, you choose what you want to do between negotiating or an all-out attack, then the cycle starts over. It's this rock, paper, scissors mechanic that makes Persona 5 so much fun, and with the life simulator mechanic, by socializing and increasing your confidant ranks with certain people, you gain more abilities to make the battles more interesting. For example, with Hifumi, this shogi player you meet in the church, the very first ability she gives you at rank 1 is being able to switch party members during Joker's turn, which believe me, you're gonna need to get as soon as you can. That has saved my life on a number of occasions. One of my other favorite skills comes from a party member named Futaba, where upon increasing the confidant rank to 4, there's a chance that she'll use her persona to immediately down all enemies and you already get to choose what you want to do with them. That's pretty cool, but sadly I couldn't talk to Futaba at first until I had the right social stats. Yes, there are some people that won't even give you the time of day unless you have the required level on a particular social stat, like kindness or knowledge or proficiency. How you increase them depends on what kind of daily activities you do, such as studying for an exam, getting really good at video games, or putting your arteries on the verge of exploding. Occasionally, your friends will also want to hang out and do something together, like going to see a movie or admiring the fine arts, which not only increases the bond with your friends, but also increases your social stats, so it's killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You're not just improving your friendships for the sake of making the palaces less stressful either, you actually take the time to learn more about each of the characters. There's the few that aren't all that interesting, gotta be honest, but a heavy majority of them experience some kind of dilemma, and as their friend, you help them through it. This is also where dialogue options have the most effects. In typical RPG fashion, Joker is the silent protagonist that's supposed to portray as the player, but unlike Link from the Zelda series, he does actually say the odd phrase here and there and even has a few badass lines. However, hearing him speak and be a little expressive on the rare occasion doesn't make me personally think of Joker as a representation of myself, but more of a completely separate character, with the dialogue choices letting me shape him how I want to. You get to choose what to say throughout the entire game, but outside of social interactions, they don't have much effect on the story. When you're hanging out with friends, however, choosing the right phrase could give you more points towards your confidant, and when enough is earned, you can move on to the next rank in a future meeting and find out what else happens with their situation. This makes you feel like you're a huge part of a group, and it's really awesome seeing all these characters come together to tackle the metaverse or just simply hanging out. They don't feel like party members, they feel like actual friends, people I wouldn't mind hanging out with in real life. And if you get the confidant rank to max level, you not only upgrade that party member's persona to make it stronger and more resistant to their weaknesses, you also have the option to be in a romantic relationship with any of the female characters. You can even date your teacher if you wanted to. I certainly wouldn't. I mean, if you're into that, then great, but that's just a bit too weird for me. Being in a relationship doesn't necessarily benefit you apart from earning a couple of items at the very end of the story to use a New Game Plus, but the extra scenes you can get by taking them out somewhere and spending time with them during the holidays or special occasions is just precious. Some of these interactions are so cute that I'll be surprised if I have any masculinity left. Kinda wish Joker would emote a little more during these moments, but at least I can choose what I want him to say and make his girlfriend redder than a tomato. As you can likely tell, my personal choice was Makoto. She's the student council president at the school, and when you first meet her, she's a snarky goody two-shoes, but as I learned more about her and the kind of person she really is, I really warmed up to Makoto. You show her how to loosen up a bit more and see that she really does care about others and wants to help out as much as she can, even the ones that are completely oblivious to how horribly they're actually being treated. She's a total badass during combat too, only using brass knuckles and kicks to beat enemies to death, and her persona's a freaking motorcycle that fires nuclear attacks. Makoto's generally a pretty tough gal, but when you take her out on a date, she reveals her slightly more girly side and gets very affectionate towards Joker. Oh, she's so adorable! You're also able to date multiple girls if that's the kind of person you are, but I wouldn't really recommend that. Now you may be thinking, well, no shit, genius, everyone knows it's wrong. But not only does Joker get punished for having more than one girlfriend, it also gets completely retconned when you reach the game's ending. Like, imagine if as well as Makoto I started going out with An. Both of the girls would find out I cheated on them and make a big dramatic scene, but by the ending, oh look, they're both waiting for Joker like nothing ever happened. It's just inconsistent, you know? So battling different monsters and spending time with your friends is great and all, but there is one major catch to it all that I've been failing to mention up until now. You're kind of on a time limit. Each moment you tackle a palace, there's a story reason that you need to get to the end and take the treasure within a certain amount of in-game days. It's sort of like Majora's Mask in a way, only not quite as stressful, as there's no ticking clock to keep you on your toes, and it only costs a whole day to travel in the metaverse. Completing the palace itself isn't really the issue, since the time you're given to do so is quite reasonable, but this is also the best time to increase your confidants. Pre-palaces, not every day is available to do as you please, as a number of them are already booked to further progress in the story, or just because Morgana never lets you stay past your bedtime and do anything else. I appreciate you care about my health, Morgana, but you're not my freaking mother. So you have to carefully decide how you're going to spend your day and figure out what will give you the best benefits. Additionally, this means you can't always access the Velvet Room to fuse multiple personas and create a brand new one with transferred skills. This is the reason Joker's able to wield many different personas. He was given that power by the ruler of the Velvet Room, Igor, and his twin wardens, Caroline and Justine, in the hopes that he will one day prevent the inevitable ruin. There's not really a rhyme or reason as to why Igor and the Velvet Room exists though. He only contacts Joker every so often in his dreams and constantly informs him on the progress of his quote-unquote rehabilitation. I think in a way he's supposed to be this game's depiction of God, and Joker's meant to be the angel from heaven to set things right, but he's in a prison cell? Okay, that part I don't understand, but fusing personas is useful, and you can make some rather awesome ones if you know the right combinations, especially if you get friendly with the wardens and unlock even more features. You're unfortunately not given a recipe list of some kind, which I thought would have been helpful, but there are plenty of links on the internet that can tell you what makes what, and the amount of persona needed to fill the compendium is frankly absurd. Some of these designs are just flat out weird too. There's a persona incredibly late in the game that's literally a giant penis with tentacles. That's the kind of game you're playing, folks. I'm not even sure if I'm supposed to put a censor bar over it.
So I've been going on and on about how utterly amazing Persona 5 is, but I bet you're wondering if I have any major gripes with it. As much as I hate to admit it, I do have a few pet peeves. Nothing game-breaking, but a few things that I thought could have been dealt with better.
I'll start with the minor stuff. As much as I adore this story and its characters, it slows down to a crawl around the middle, more specifically as you're trying to get to the 5th palace. I won't say what happens, but I knew this plot detail was likely to come up at some point, and it's not at all necessary and does nothing but pad out the story by another couple of hours. Padding also happens when the game cuts back to the interrogation room from time to time, and to be fair, these moments are less than 30 seconds long, but it still gets a bit annoying because it happens every time you unlock a new confidant, which there are a lot of, by the way, and the questions Sae asks about some of them can be utterly laughable. Say, Ren, you seem to be pretty good with a gun. Who taught you to play video games? It's sort of along those lines. Impressively though, a heavy majority of the game's cutscenes are fully voiced, and with the main cast, there's a damn amazing effort put into each of their performances, especially considering how huge this game is. Smaller characters, however, particularly the extras, don't sound nearly as natural as the leads. Their inflections feel off a lot of the time, and it's a real shame because otherwise I would have said most of the actors do a great job. Although even with the good actors, some of the battle quotes are often repeated, and yeah, it can get annoying, but after playing long enough, they sort of go through one ear and out the other. Mementos is also definitely the weakest part of the game. It's visually uninteresting, the music's quite boring, and it's just repetitious despite the rooms being randomly generated. And what's even worse is that it goes down to at least 60 floors, and you'll need to clear all of them if you want to finish the game. You'll find tons of treasure that you can sell, which is great, but you'll likely feel a bit burned out once you reach a checkpoint. God help you, be it in Mementos or in a palace, if you come across groups of enemies that get to do more than one attack per turn for presumably no goddamn reason. Kanashiro's bank is chock full of these guys, and I've had way too many close calls to count. There was one moment though where a blue moon must have occurred and all the planets aligned because all of my party members managed to avoid a rather devastating attack, and it was so satisfying.
Whoa! That's how true Phantom Thieves do it.
The best way to get through this place is to use Ryuji's headbutt skill, which has a medium chance of causing the forget status on the targeted enemy, meaning they can't use any special attacks of their own until the status wears off. You could probably try and focus on a particular confidant as well, but a couple of them may not actually be worth doing. For example, I didn't think this news journalist named Oya was especially helpful. Her rewards just include softening the penalty if you get caught in the palaces, which like I mentioned earlier is really not that hard to prevent, so Oya ends up being kinda useless for me. Persona 5's passage of time can also be a bit strange. For instance, you can fast travel between areas by train without any time passing at all, but if you do something like make a tiny lockpick or do your laundry, that apparently takes the whole damn evening. Granted, you can eventually pay your personal maid to do those things for you if you raise her confidant high enough so that you can do something else with your time, but for one thing, she's a little expensive to hire and it gradually builds up as you play the game, and secondly, because of this bizarre passage of time, there's no way in hell you're gonna maximize all confidants by the end of the game, unless maybe you're looking at a strategy guide the entire time. But either way, you're gonna need to do as much as you can, because if at any point Joker falls in battle, that's an instant game over. And no, it doesn't matter if there are 3 other party members that are perfectly capable of reviving Joker. And you are gonna die somewhere, I guarantee it, and it'll completely come out of the blue. Like, what the hell was that? The enemy cast a spare on my party and followed with an attack that killed me straight away. That's not freaking fair. And now I've gotta restart from the last save room and do all that traveling again. This is the most bullshit part of the game, and it doesn't help that some of the later palaces can get a bit stingy with save rooms. You could be playing for maybe 30 minutes to a whole hour and not come across a single save room. It's only not so much of a problem when you get to the bosses, because if Joker dies there, you can simply restart the battle. I get it's to add challenge and tension and all that, but come on, you could at the very least let us save more frequently. It is frustrating like nothing else when that kind of stuff happens, but I guess to be fair, I haven't experienced it too often, and it's the sort of frustrating that you look at the game and think to yourself, alright, come on, one more round, I'm not letting you win this time. But none of those things stop me from heavily enjoying Persona 5. I still love the story, I still love the characters, the gameplay's fun as hell, and it's absolutely drenched with style that's totally in your face and it looks awesome through and through. This even applies to the menus, for crying out loud. Look how fancy this all is. Persona 5 is a very cool looking game, and the anime cutscenes especially bring it on home. Like with Catherine, there aren't that many of them, but when they do appear, they're consistently well animated, and I'm just a huge sucker for them in video games. I thought it was nice as well that the game takes place in a more realistic setting for an RPG instead of making it conventional fantasy. Now, I have no problem with a fantasy setting. Some of the best games of all time have fantasy elements, but I thought it was a breath of fresh air to be in a setting a bit more relatable to me personally. And the music, my god, the music. This is such an incredible soundtrack. Whether you're roaming around the streets of Shibuya or battling the forces of evil, there is a great song to accompany you. Last Surprise, Life Will Change, Beneath the Mask, Blooming Villain, Rivers in the Desert, it's all damn good stuff. And oh man, the ending. Never have I felt so satisfied finishing a game while giving me all sorts of warm and fuzzy feelings. This game is so good I immediately went to New Game Plus after completing it because I didn't want to say goodbye to my virtual pals just yet. And it's a good thing I did too, because it turned out there was a secret boss fight with Caroline and Justine only available in New Game Plus. They were kicking my ass, but it was cool to see that playing the game again gave you something a little extra. I got pretty close to killing the Reaper in Mementos as well, which isn't New Game Plus exclusive, but around halfway through we kept spamming this bless attack that instantaneously killed my party members almost every single time. And Ryuji and An were my best fighters at this point in the game, so I wanted to keep them alive, but the Reaper just wasn't having it. Someday I will beat it, maybe in New Game Plus when I collect more Personas.
You know, I'm really tempted to call this my favorite game of all time. I just love it so very much. Yeah, screw it. This is the best game I've ever played. I haven't experienced anything else like it, and I don't always binge through a single game, let alone a JRPG. Persona 5 is simply a masterpiece, and I believe that anyone with a PS3, or even better, a PS4, should really consider trying it out.
I dare say I'll be playing through Persona 5 many more times for years to come, and so far I'm even enjoying the anime that started a while ago. Okay, the fight scenes can be kinda lame, but the characterization's still there and the story is how it should be. If I ever start doing streaming for Twitch or something, I definitely want Persona 5 to be my first playthrough. Maybe I could try Merciless Mode, the game's hardest difficulty. That would certainly be something. Perhaps I could play through the whole thing with the different costumes you can download. I got everyone feeling festive at the final area, and of course I had to get the Catherine outfits, it suits the game so well. The costumes each come with their own battle themes too, in case you get sick of Last Surprise playing for the 200th time. I'd be interested to try out some of the other Personas as well. I hear Persona 4 Golden is one of the more highly enjoyed ones if Persona 5 wasn't already the first pick. I understand that this kind of game won't appeal to absolutely everyone. There is a certain mindset to be had if you want the most enjoyment out of Persona 5. But if you think you've got that mindset and you've got the cash to spare or a copy you can borrow, then go and play this game. I'll wait.
I plan on releasing another video very soon with my extended thoughts on Persona 5, like certain plot moments, so if you're interested, I'll see you then. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys next time for the Kingdom Hearts 358 Days Over 2 review. This will be the start of the long and winding road to Kingdom Hearts 3. God help me, and I hope you all enjoy.